Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Ant Pod. This is now episode 18, and today we're talking about how to run an ant shop, and more specifically, how to run an ant nest manufacturing ant store. So, yeah, that's what we're going to focus on. And you may hear a little laugh, and that's because we have invited Wakooshi into this chat to chat a little bit. Now, fun fact about Wakooshi. He's actually the guest who have visited the Ant Pod the most time. It's now your third time on the Ant Pod. And
really?
yeah, it's actually, you were in episode 3 and 4. So for those who need to hear about Wakooshi, you can hear episode 3 again. But yeah, Wakooshi, you are an ant store that both sell ants, but mainly your main priority, as far as I'm aware, it's the ant nest side of the business. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, it's the ant selling side of things was an initial thing that we looked into, but it's nice that there's so many cool stores. Like Sam here from Ant Antics. They're making massive waves in the quality of ants, the care, the distribution. That it's fantastic to see that these stores are kind of coming along, and it's meant that I've now been able to step back from that. Because a few years ago, when I used to be looking at ants more, there wasn't a great range. But like I said, places like Ant Antics, they're making a great headway with that, and it's meant I can really almost fully step back from it. Still hold a few, some of the European stuff, but and the stuff that doesn't really take a massive amount of the time to look after. But it's now just fully focused on Formicarium, the new ideas, the hardware side of things now. So I think because there's still, from the hobby side of thing, I think that's still a massive area that needs looking at.
And I think it's actually quite interesting. You say that Ant Antics is starting to sell a lot more high quality, or at least the unboxing is a lot higher quality. I got a package from Ant Antics not that long ago, and I actually got one of your products within the nest, or within the box. What's that all about?
So which one was it? Which did you get in the box?
The little mini Outworld thing.
The test tube pods. Okay, yeah. Exactly. So I mean, well, it's good you mentioned that, because that's kind of one of the things that Rich from Ant Antics, as Sam knows, he's fantastic with the ideas that he comes up with, the way that he's trying to make ants just really arrive in great condition with all the information there. And then the test tube pod was kind of just the next step in making really pet ants done right. And because the test tube pod is in essence it's just a mini outworld that can connect onto a test tube. So you get your ants in the test tube, and one of the most challenging things as a beginner is to kind of sometimes feed the ants, even if it's just getting a drop of sugar in, or just feeding the tube, or there's waste or something. And that's also one of the reasons why test tube colonies can fail, because bacteria builds up, food goes bad. Ants get lost or escape when you're taking the cotton out. So a simple solution is a test tube pod, and it's just a tiny little box shaped item that just docks onto the end and has a sliding lid on it, and it's got a cap on the end as well, so that when it comes to moving colonies into a setup, the little pod actually can work as a tube connection to the actual test tube. So you can just plug a 13mm tube into it, and then you can hook that up to any sort of nest and stuff easily. So it because it's difficult. It was one of the questions that I used to get asked a lot was, how I've got my ants in the test tube, how do I now get these into an actual nest? So now that what comes with every order is basically a mini outworld and a test tube connector in one, included with the package.
Yeah, and I feel like it's really nice for the buyer to get these things. Now you say it's like a really simple little box that you have designed. At least that's how you say it. Ant keeping Richards have asked how difficult is it to design such ant nest. This is just a little box, but there's a lot of different functionalities in these small products. Has that product taken more time to develop compared to like a big nest, or is size together with? Well, does the size add up to the time?
Not necessarily. I mean, small products can take a really long time. I mean, there's quite a few things I'm working at the moment now, which are actually they're designed to be very, very small footprints, and that also has its own challenges along the way, because you've then got you don't have as much space to play with, and you're trying to fit as many features in. But typically, the larger something is, the more time it generally takes to get going and stuff. But that particular pod, the idea is quite simple, and in essence, it's a very scaled down version of the Venus. So it didn't take too much work to actually get it finished.
Yeah, so I guess it's also a lot of how much you've built over the years. I'm guessing it gets a lot easier to start with a new nest when you have like the base design compared to the first. Like you started this the last year you released, or this year you released the whole Gen 3 thing. Mm-hmm. I'm guessing that was a lot of work to develop the first nest, and the other versions was kind of just scaled up versions of the same nest.
Yeah, I mean, always when it comes to the core foundation idea, whenever you're designing a new range or a completely out there product, yes, it always takes a long time, because the products that are sort of way out the box, they are the ones that usually require the most amount of testing to make sure they work. They have the greatest chance of failure. But the only way of kind of moving the hobby forward and kind of moving forward is to try new things, to test new things. It's nice to see, in the last year, 2 years, so many more, multi-material nests are on the market, not just 3D printed or just Whitong, or, people are really seeing what's about, getting ideas, testing new things, trying new techniques, and it's nice because obviously the community shares what they're doing. They're trying different ants, and obviously people are keeping more varied ants now. There's much more exotics available from stores, so people can not just trying Mesa barbarus and Lassus nigers and the very basic ants. They're trying some of these more difficult ones, like Harpegnathus diversa, the sort of more exotic ones. So it's nice to see how sort of nests are holding up against the more challenging species now. So that's cool.
Yeah, and I feel like that's one of the big things I like about this year is there's a lot more specialized nests coming out. And I want to also bring Casey in, because Casey is live with us today. And Casey, I know you have a lot of going back and forth whether you want to try and design some of your own nest and not necessarily sell them, but design a few nests and try them out. How do you think of the whole designing a nest from a complete beginner perspective?
So I always wanted my hold on. Let me gather my words real quick. I always want it to be like as close. I really like how like Wakooshi's stuff is all really clean, and like it is very it looks very modern and clean. But when I'm making my own, my goal is to always try and make it species specific. Like I want them to, because like the idea being is that like if the nest is closer to like how the species would do it in the wild, then they would like the idea being that they would flourish better. But I have a hard time coming up with like chambers and things like that. I always million harebrained ideas and no way to follow through with most of them.
Yeah, I think personally, I think where I would struggle a lot is to make a thought become reality.
It's putting the idea to a physical form. It makes it difficult.
Yeah, and saying that, how many prototypes do you make that are just complete failures? Do you have some ones that's just failures, or are you good at kind of sorting your thoughts out?
Oh yeah. I mean, there's tons, absolutely tons of failures.
You want to go, Casey?
I mean, I've made like 3 viable nests, but like of 20 attempts. So like, it's not necessarily easy, and I definitely admire the amount of effort that Wakooshi's putting into designing. I actually re-listened to the Leafcutter episode today.
Oh. So you've heard the good old episodes then?
Oh, absolutely. I had to go do my research.
Oh, yeah. Well, Sid, how many do you have that you like scratch before they even come out of your head?
I think it's probably like 90% failure rate. Well, I don't say failure rate, but 90% of the ideas will probably half of the ideas get to a very basic design stage, and then when it goes through the design stage, you kind of either sometimes get bored of the idea, and then you realize actually this is not really going to be practical. It's not really going to have the desired effect. Or what quite often happens is throughout the process of designing the beginning stages, I may get another idea that I think actually, you know what, this will be even better. So I'll have a design which will look like one thing, and then it'll just blend into something completely else. Like, for example, like the Venus, when it first started, it actually looked more like a test tube, the Ants Canada test tube portal. Because it really, that the idea was a way of connecting multiple test tubes so that you'd have more nest space, and they'd have an outworld area, because the idea of the test tube portal was a very good idea. But there was the only place to really get them from was from the States, and the shipping, and there was a lot of people in the UK complaining that the shipping on them was really expensive. So I thought, well, okay, a possible option could be make something similar that achieves the same job. So that was how it kind of started. It was just like a little box, and then it kind of just evolved into having something that would then block out the light around the tubes, and then having a red lid on the. So it just kind of started simple, and then the initial idea just ended up being nothing like that in the end. So it went kind of really off course, and it worked well. And if I say so myself, it's but a lot of ideas, they don't pan out like that. They will just go to initial design stage, and then I'll just usually either get bored of them or decide actually there's something better, or or just it could be just down to maybe the manufacturer side of it. Maybe it's not cost effective. Maybe it won't, through designing it more, I realize actually it's not going to have the desired effect. So, and that happens a lot. So it's probably a 90% rate of an idea turning into not an idea in the end.
Yeah, I think that's one of the reasons why I really enjoy your products, because they are very well thought. They're not just first thought coming out. You do a lot of prototyping, which is both very annoying if you're waiting for a leaf cutter nest, but also very nice if you are another guy who's buying a leaf cutter nest and it just works as intended.
Well, the leaf cutter pod system, when what we did with the leaf cutter pods, with the group of us where we were all testing the beta versions and we were trialing error, I'm really glad we did that. And actually that was a really fun process. And it worked out really well. We had, great fun along the way. And I think that we've made a nice product there that's people can see, works and does its job, makes things simple. So that was a fun process doing all that testing side of things.
Yeah, it definitely was. I want to bring Sam in as well, just because Sam is actually also here. We're almost a full crew. I want to say, Sam, as you are of course within Antics as ant shop and seller. When you're selling ants, do you often push people towards Wakooshi, or do you have your own opinions, or how do you feel about only selling ants? Have you ever thought of going into designing your own nest, or is it just pure ants?
So the focus at the minute is obviously ants, and it will still always be the ants. We're in a perfect situation at the minute, and obviously we're good friends with Sid anyway, but we also believe in his products and we enjoy using the products. We think they work brilliantly. It's why we stock them. So it's a case of the idea at the minute is why fix something that isn't broken, in that kind of sense of we've got a perfect solution. We've got nests that we can supply to people that we trust, we enjoy, we think they're good. We can just focus on the ants, and that's. Do you
then also stock the Wakooshi products?
Yeah, so we've got a few at the minute, and it's just a few outworlds, and obviously the popular Venus Mini, and then the Queen pods as well, which are proving quite popular just because they're not expensive, and as you said before, it's just one of those things that makes life a lot easier for new people. And even experienced keepers, it's just a useful thing to have. So the basic kind of the line and the range, we've got, and yeah, it's doing well.
Yeah, that's I think that's what I personally really like seeing from outside, how a store works together with how they cooperate while sending people back and forth. I feel like that's something that's really nice to look from an outside at least. And I think personally, I didn't know Wakooshi before the Venus hit the market. I'd heard the name but never looked into it. And the Venus really changed my whole look on you, Wakooshi said. Because, well, that's when I got my first products and came into the whole Wakooshi system. And Ant's Anthem asks, how long does it take to make a whole new ant nest? And when I've talked with you, you seem like the Venus is finally a done product. How long did that take from first testing to first prototype to first sold Venus to the new version of the Venus to the final version? Just to give the viewers an outside perspective. How long did it take from beginning till you called it done?
So it probably went through about 2 months of design. Then it probably went through about 2 to 3 months of me keeping about 20, because I remember having 2 of those Venus holders that you have. So there was 20 colonies in 20 Venus in 2 of the racks. And I had them running for about 2 to 3 months, just to ensure that, the nice thing is it didn't require much testing because it was very simple. It's just a little outworld with test tubes, so the results shouldn't have been true. But obviously, to test the escape prevention, and I tried lots of small ants in there and stuff, and I just wanted to test the limits from that side of things. So it was about 3 months of testing. So you're probably up to about 5 months there. Then it launched, and then there was a lot of criticism from Answered about quite a few parts of it, which was quite fun. Again, it was the whole constructive criticism, but that's where this is one of the parts that I love about it the most. Doing everything in house and being able to change anything about a design literally at the flip of a coin. And one of the biggest. I initially designed it with a port, and then thought, well, actually, it's not that difficult just to undock a test tube and put it in an outworld. But to quite a few people, there was a lot of resistance about not having an expansion port on there. So to keep old Hood happy, I kind of then installed the port cap on the end so that a tube can be connected. And in hindsight, I should have actually had that from the start, because actually it was a very good idea. There was also quite a few other changes that happened over the next probably like 3 or so months, 4 months maybe. I think there were still changes happening for 6-7 months after that. Very minor, we're just talking like 0.1 millimeter adjustments to lids to make them not fit so snug, so they were easier to remove, and just very minor tweaks. Just when I get kind of told by people, this is a bit of a challenge to remove because it's a bit tight fitting. So then it's just a simple adjustment, and I think it probably took about over a year. Until I was fully happy with it. Yeah, I'm fully happy with it a year later, and because it gets to the point where just no one says anything about it. There's not anything they kind of wish for. When I think one of the main things was the having a little handle for the lid. Which I kind of thought, do I design it in there? But then I think for some people it might ruin the aesthetics of it. So that's where I have the suction lids, that if people want them, they can have the suction lid which goes onto it. So a few products have been designed off the back of some requests for it. So yeah, I mean, it's but then it's there's a couple of products that have been made alongside it, like the Venus Mini. So I don't think the range is finished yet, but definitely the main classic Venus. I think it's pretty close to being.
Oh my bad. It's just popped into my head out of curiosity. Is there any particular species that you use to test? Is there anything that you feel like pushes your equipment to the limits so you can make sure that they're totally escape proof?
Phalaenopsis.
Well, I mean, I kind of accumulated a wide range of ants now. and I think, there's probably not really any genus that, the main genus that people would keep. Geminata have been added to the arsenal now, thanks to Hood. But there's small ants, there's tiny Phodolae, there's larger Phodolae, there's Harpegnathos, there's Tetramoriums, there's Monomoriums, there's tons of Camponotus, there's exotics, natives, Lasius. I'm trying to think. There's just there's about.
They're definitely tested on a little bit of everything.
Oh, it's like 30 different species. So there's a wide range of different size and selections and things in there that I'm testing various products in. And mostly it's because I want to start very heavily moving away from classic. Not moving away from. I'm happy with kind of working on that, but I do think that the secret to taking things to the next step is to really, and I mentioned this before, the future is species-specific nests. Because I'm just seeing one of the downsides of the hobby at the moment is there's so much unexplained in the hobby, and there's so many species that are just people just aren't aware of how difficult they can be. And some of them absolutely need the right setup. There's no way of putting them in a normal nest. You cannot put. You cannot put weaver ants. Yeah, you cannot put weaver ants in a nest. It doesn't work. They need their arboreal setups. They need the ability to do what they do, and they tend to be okay, but they won't thrive, or they'll slowly die out. It's there might be the very few exceptional cases, but the vast majority, they need the right type of environment for them. So that's where I think that's what's key, and that's what's letting a lot of people down when they want to get into the exotics, because natives are cool, but don't get me wrong, but the real excitement comes from the more exotic and more interesting, faster growing, or some of the different stuff. Unfortunately, Europe.
On a previous episode, we mentioned it is the ants that are highly specialized to their environments that really get people going.
Yeah, I'd definitely say that. And it's if I could go down to only 5, top 5, if I can only keep 5 of my colonies, every single one of those were probably exotics. The leaf cutters being one of them, and every single one of those really. Thinking about it, really the best scenario for them would be a species-specific nest, or something tailored definitely for them. Doesn't mean they all can't be in normal nests, but I definitely feel like there is work to be done there. So it's there's a lot of work to do. There's a lot of development to work on. There's a lot of testing. So, but it's fun. It's keeping ants. It's learning about ants. So the process is great, and it's helping people along the way.
You said you
accidentally got really good at biology.
Yeah, learned a lot of different features about testing. I just remembered how much testing with the leaf cutters, how much different things we just studied and figured out. But something totally different. You said you made everything in house. You have a laser cutter, right? You have everything for making your own nest. So you just get the raw materials and boom, finished nest from on the other side.
Yep. Raw materials come in, finished nests come out. Yeah.
So if I'm not wrong, Aesthetic he buys laser cut pieces. If maybe I'm wrong, don't. Sorry,
yeah, Aesthetic. I mean, it doesn't. It's not necessarily that makes too much of a difference.
No. I just want to get the point that what would you kind of recommend beginners? Because a lot of people are like, I'll get a 3D printer and then I can just go all in. Is there like some? If you want to go into just making nests for your own, not necessarily sell them, is there a way you would like start? Is it the way 3D printing or
the way I would start? I mean, there's tons of different ways of making your own nest. I mean, there's tons of great content creators out there who have got great suggestions. Whitong is a great material for someone who wants to DIY or start making their own nest, because it's an easy material to work with. You don't need to invest much money to start doing them. You could in essence get away with like a chisel or something along those lines, a block of Whitong, and and silicone a piece of clear plastic or something along those lines. It's very low cost way of doing it. Of course, you can get 3D printers. You can start 3D printing nests. 3D printing's great, and it's a great structural material to work with. Surprisingly, I'm not the biggest fan of full 3D printed nests. They can be great, but I think that they work well when they're combined with different materials. Because
was the Gen 2 lineup all 3D printing?
Well, that had the gypsum hydration in there, so
that's true.
It was the 3D printed. They were heavy 3D printed, but they didn't. They relied on gypsum hydration, which is quite a steady hydration method. It absorbs and holds water quite nicely. It releases it slowly. It doesn't grow bacteria. So it's a safe material to work with. There are sponges which are easier to work to work with initially. They can work fine, but they can they sometimes need replacing sooner, or they can depending on how the design is done, they can leak, or they can harbor quite a bit of bacteria. But generally they're fine. So there's a few avenues. People want a 3D print nest, they could just start with sponges. So yeah, there's a lot of ways they can do it. 3D printers are a good way to try more intricate designs. But things like Waitong is a very, very good material to work with for trying to do more natural nests.
I must say, I moved my flowers from a Gen 3. I just want to say that the Gen 2 lineup was this lineup where you could connect the different nests together, and this new Gen 3, which isn't that new anymore, but Gen 3 was made around a layer of acrylic, then 3D printing with a different material inside, like cork or just acrylic. It was like a mix-up of different materials, and that's what I thought was brilliant, because that wasn't really something we had seen too much before within the hobby. But what surprised me a lot was I hadn't hydrated my gypsum block for my flowers colony for a few weeks because I wanted to move them. And when I then decided to unscrew the nest and actually move them out, the block was still cold and wet.
Yeah, they hold.
It's insane.
It holds for a very long time.
How well they work. Completely insane.
It's a good material for replicating underground. Of the different materials there are. Waitong is great. The one problem with Waitong is it's got an extremely high surface area, and it's very porous, and there's a lot of air bubbles in it. It doesn't hold a lot of liquid, being very hollow. So it has the ability to absorb very quickly, but then it can dry out just as quickly as well. So it is a good material, but it's very large surface area can be its downfall. So it tends to fluctuate in its humidity levels, and one thing that ants are very keen on is having very stable climates and humidities. It's quite often, why they live underground, because that far underground, the humidity tends to be very constant. If it rains, it doesn't really penetrate down to them quite as quickly, and it makes very little difference. And when it dries out, it's the same way. They don't dry out instantly. So that's why they like those deep nests, because they have a very stable temperature and humidity. So that is important to them. Yeah.
So in part 10 we talked about I think it was part 10, we talked about our favorite ant nest, and we all kind of agreed it would be cool to have some kind of mix between natural and not natural. And we as non-nest makers just thought it would be cool to do something like that. Is that something you've thought about, or do you just want to keep this clean look? Because I know people like Tahil ants go for a lot more natural. Same with Portmore Arts, they go for these natural cavey looks. Is there a reason why you've chosen these a bit more just laboratory look?
Products? So I know what you mean. It's mostly just because it works well. I know it necessarily doesn't have the same desired looks. There's a lot in the pipeline, without ruining some of the stuff coming through. There's a lot of the stuff that's working with a lot more natural materials. And I have been experimenting a lot with setups that are using digging mediums and things. So there is a few more kind of more natural feeling setups in development. So yeah, there is. I know what you mean. So there is some mix mashups of natural soil based setups and stuff in development. So it is something that I have kind of thought about.
Wow, didn't think you would answer that.
Do you draw your inspiration from like what's needed, or like when you're creating something new from scratch, you just kind of think of a species and you're all, should I build something for these guys, or anything to that effect? Like,
good question. There's two things that usually trigger a product, and that is a gap or a requirement for such a product. So usually people saying, do you know what? I really need, like, one of the products I'm quite keen to get wrapped up is the setup for the Harping Nathos trap jaws, because there's a lot of people who've kind of recently got into those, and just like leaf cutters last year, I really wanted to start looking at something for honeypots. That was a real. It's like a self challenge for me. I would love to one day successfully home or raise a colony of honeypots. Now, obviously, in this from you, over in the States, that doesn't seem like too much of a challenge, but over in Europe, they're extreme. Well, yeah, but you've got access to them a little bit easier and probably a lot cheaper than we have them here over in Europe. And they typically probably have, they're around about 120 to 130 pounds. That's probably not far off US dollars, $150, $150. But they've got a success rate of probably, or they've got a death rate of about 99%. So it's a lot of money for probably a 1% chance of survival or getting them past the founding stages. So it could be setups that may be contributing to that. So maybe if with a very specific setup, that would come down to maybe a 70%, which might make it a little bit more realistic. That's definitely one I want.
I caught 5 2 years ago, and then I obtained 2 this year, and they all of them failed except for one, and that one's still, thankfully that one's still alive, but absolutely super nervous. It only has 8 workers and no repletes, and I'm just
because
what kind of setup?
It's probably Tar Heel.
Right now I have them in a Tar Heel not Hearth. I have them in a Tar Heel Fortress. That's the one.
So even with the safe Tar Heel Ants nest, they are still very not easy to get.
If you look at them wrong, they'll just croak over. It's
yeah. So I mean, it's a combination of, is it the setups, or in the wild are they generally that sensitive to the point where they have that low survival rate in the wild? That is the case with some ant queens. In the wild they have an incredibly low. They rely on numbers because a very small percentage survive. So it could be just down to that. But then in Europe there is a massive lack of, let's just say, Tar Heel ant nests.
Yeah.
They seem to be
for the same reason that there's not. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's
so
just shipping's too hard.
It's the go-to option for honeypots, and there's a massive lack of that type of stuff in Europe. But back to the kind of original point of I was going to go into that, but then there was more of a need for leaf cutters. So Rich came to me and said, look, I'm starting to stock leaf cutters. There's not really setups for them, and naturally for stores to stock ants, they need to really suggest setups for those ants to go into. You're not going to sell many ants. You're not going to sell many leaf cutters if people are like, well, I don't know how to keep them. 100%. And I think since that whole collaboration of getting leaf cutters widely available, I mean, there's 3 stores now. I mean, 2 years ago, I think 3 or 4 years ago now, there was just one store that stocked leaf cutters, and they sold out quite quickly, and then they weren't available then for 2 more years. Now they are probably available nearly all year round. and having reliable setups for them, I think has probably contributed to them, the success of those. So yes, it is definitely a combination of what there is a demand for, as to what I will work on, but then sometimes it's just a case of personal need. So I may look at my colony and go, do you know what, I just feel like they're not doing as good as they should be, and then I kind of look as to the reason why, and I start looking at how they are in the wild and what type of nest environment that they are used to, and I realize that these guys need a tailored nest, that they're not gonna cut it in classic nests. So that will be when I then start working on setups that are species specific, or I will, just for example, like now
Is there a species you've ever given up on trying to make a nest for? Or at least taking a break?
That's a good question. Well, I think actually, Geminata. Yeah, because I originally I did initially the very first the MS nests initially. They were actually going to be called the Solenopsis nests. They were going to be the first kind of specific nest. They were tailored at very tiny ants to make, not really anywhere they can kind of get out from. They've got mesh blocking them out, the hydration. They've got solid walls, tight seals, lots of screws, tubes. So that there's no gaps. That was. But then I realized, do you know what? Why am I making something for this kind of ant? And it was at that point I thought, do you know what? I'm going to change the focus of this now. This is just small ants. This is not. I don't want to promote that species. It's great what Ants Hood has done. Not great with him dropping them on me, but it's great that he's kind of shown the real demon that is Geminata, and I guess you could say Invicta are much the same as well, and those types of Solenopsis, they are real forces to reckon with, and they definitely shouldn't be keeping light heart, taken sort of, what's the word I'm looking for? Taken lightly. They are serious ants, and it's not just them escaping. Look what they did. They escaped and they killed a load of his colonies. That's one thing I don't think he factored in that would ever be a risk. It is, that's a real danger. So it's okay if maybe they're your only colony, but if you keep other colonies and you have a colony like those, if they do escape, it's usually a real issue. But if they get into your other setups and they kill all your other ants, then it's 10 times worse. So
I feel that that's a good point with all escaping ants, especially as a store. And when I recommend you as a store, I put a lot of trust in the products that you make. Ant Enclosures asks, how do you ensure a nest is escape proof? Would you put your Gen 3 nest as not Solenopsis proof, or would you put a warning in, or what would you do if you saw some crazy species escape your ant nest?
To be honest, I mean, look, every product, there's nothing out there that really has been been out and released long enough to put everything fully to the test. And there's all you can do is the best you can possibly do with as many ants as you can possibly put in them and test them out. And that's where it's nice now. Number one, keeping so many personal colonies in the arsenal to put things through the test. I mean, the Gen 3 nests, they have shown that they are Solenopsis proof. Ants Hood had his colony in them. They were getting out through elements of the outworld, which we have looked at in depth, figured out what happened there and what the issues were. Those have been remedied, and those are the types of things. When these things happen, it's just that background work to figure out through coming up with what happened, where they were happening, why they might have happened, all the different parameters. But keeping different things in nests, using different chemicals in nests, using in different temperatures, all these things can make things happen to materials. So, just because I keep something here and it works perfectly fine doesn't mean that someone else, who's keeping them in a room 10 degrees cooler, putting different substrates in there and, might cause things to react differently. which may then potentially create some, small gaps and things like that. But generally, that's the importance of when you sell a lot of nests. The more nests you sell, the more that they go through testing, because you are then getting the feedback from much more people. If you sell 10 nests, you're only going to get feedback from 10 people with 10 different types of ants. If you sell 100, you're then going to get 100 different types of ants and 100 different types of feedback. So the great thing is the more you sell, the more feedback you get, and the more products the better that product becomes. So, I wouldn't say anything is 100% escape proof, but it's just about testing them enough and getting the sort of processes right to minimize the amount. But like with the Solenopsis, they're kept here in a Gen 3 XL, and they're going strong, and they are probably one of the hardest, I think, to really test things. They really put everything to the test.
Yeah. Solenopsis is not a species you need to play around with. They are on another level.
Wow,
I'm pretty sure that your Gen 2 is not really meant for such species, right?
No. I mean, because of the links. I mean, that's one of the things I'm looking at with Generation 4. Generation 4, I want to fix. I want to alternate now with a classic nest range, which is like Gen 3. Just not designed to modularly connect. They can connect, they can expand, of course, but they're not designed to clip and lock together sort of thing. But I do always want to run a modular and a classic nest style. And it's the downside with the Gen 2 was the links, the way that they join together. It's quite difficult to get a system which can lock things together, but then keep that sort of, Solenopsis proof seal. Or small ants, let's say. Let's not use Solenopsis, but that's where it's kind of Gen 4 is changing that system up, where it will create the same modular or similar modular system, but with a different joining system, so that the links are more secure, because they were the weak point of Gen 2.
Yeah, Phil, the thing I really love about, of course, I'm a big fan of your work, because you go so much into details with all these different things. And I think another thing I really enjoy seeing is how you interact. I often see people online with, oh no, my ant escaped into the hydration chamber or something, and I'll often see you in the comments section trying to help. Have you ever thought of going out with proper fixes, like saying out, okay, all these people with these problems, you should be aware. I saw it was an old Gen 2 nest where they had bitten through the gypsum, and the Nikos were coming into a upper part of the nest, and you said that it was fixed, and you was like, yeah, I'm going to send you something new. But have you ever thought of going out and saying a public statement? It's probably
so I know what you mean. Yeah, I mean, it's as with anything, if anyone's having any difficulties with any products, just contact us. It's not one of those things. I want to know if there's any issues with products, and I want to, because that's how often, because sometimes, for example, people buy the Gen 2 modular stuff. I don't use any of that stuff now, because it's moving on to the Gen 3s, the Saturns. All my ants are most of them are in Saturns at the moment, or in prototypes and testing units and things. But I don't use the Gen 2, but that's where if people use them and notice an issue, I need to know about that. And if I know about it, I can then fix it, because everything's done again in-house. It comes back down to that. If something doesn't quite fit right, or some parts changed or whatever, it's a very quick fix. And then quite often it's just a case of sending out a replacement part. And then that's, be it a replacement lid that's got a slightly different design, or a new part of the frame, or sometimes a replacement unit, depends what the issue is. And it's everything from everything that I sell, I want to make sure is fit for purpose. So if it's not, I need to know so I can remedy it. So but that's how the products evolve. It's just like with the Saturns. They actually, to be honest, of all the launches they had, next to no, they've had very little changes. I don't think, in fact, I've changed anything from launch. But very recently, someone made a suggestion. It was actually Stein and Ants Insight from Discord came up with a nice suggestion of, actually, do you know what? We would really like some windows at the back where the pillars meet the acrylic. So now that's been updated. It was tested. it's working well, and it gives you the visibility to look in the vertical pillar now where they get up the test tubes. So just a small change, you know, it's a very quick design change that's now implemented and now going out as standard with all the new versions that are sort of going out now. So it's, you know, a lot of the time it's just making that suggestion, and if it's a good idea, if it makes something better, you know, it's implemented.
Yeah, it's there's so many of these small things that goes into creating these products, which I just love. I love hearing about all of this. We also have a question from Hognus Boy saying, "Is this your main source of income?"
It's one of them, yeah. I mean, I'd probably say it's the main. You could say, yeah. I mean, there's other things I do outside of Wakooshi and things, but yeah, it's the main source.
And how long has that taken? Because what surprised me a lot is you've been doing this a lot longer than I initially expected.
Well, let's see. I think I started doing ant stuff. I think it was like 2019-ish, around then. And then initially wasn't sure, you know, if there was really a market for this, or, you know, I was new to ants, so I didn't really have too much experience with them. But I like product design, like the testing side of things. It just started falling into place really, and then just over time, keeping ants. You know, I've always been into praying mantis and spiders and that type of stuff, and it's, as I noticed, just the more and more I was doing ants, the more and more, the less and less I was interested in the other types of you know, exotic pets and things. And it's not till you kind of keep ants you realize, damn, you know, these things are really, really, you know, they're really in depth. There's a lot to them. You know, their characteristics, their behavior, their personality, you know, everything about them. But just even from a science point of view, you know, they're so underappreciated, and some of these species just, you know, they do things that just blow me away. You know, it's when you've got leafcutter ants collectively lifting up a fungus and relocating it, you know, when they're the size of, you know, a small football, you know, it's insane that you think that they can somehow lift this very soft, you know, it's quite difficult to move fungus because it's a very soft item, but they've managed to lift this up with all the ants in the brood inside and then somehow relocate it to another side of the pod in the same orientation and then put it down. You know, it's actually quite amazing. And you start thinking of actually the amount of work that went into something like that process. You kind of think, well, how do they communicate that? And it's when you start realizing the intelligence of ants. And, you know, we sometimes overlook them and just think, oh, they're just digging holes. But when you look at the actual science of why they're digging holes in certain locations for certain reasons, down to flooding, humidity, safety, escapes, everything, you know, they're not just randomly digging holes. They are, you know, they are architects. They're scientists. They're, you know, that they study weather. They, you know, it's tremendous. There's a reason they're so successful.
Yeah,
they're definitely a good example of looking at the bigger picture.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, I read somewhere recently there's some
one at a time. They're all derpy and slow and stuff like that. But when you watch them work as a whole, then it really starts to make sense.
Yeah, I mean they've just nailed what really a species needs to do to be successful. I mean, you know, I think, like I said, I think they read somewhere that they outnumber humans 2 billion to 1 or something.
Yeah, so 2.5 million.
You kind of think, well, you know.
Yeah, can I just say that?
Billion, I think I read somewhere.
Oh yeah, there's like per human there's 2.5 million ants per human, so they outnumber by a lot. That article came out like last week. Oh my god! Everyone in my family and in my school said, "Ah, did you know that was?" Yeah, a lot of people said that to me the day that those articles came out. I feel like we've been quite through everything. I kind of already know your answer, but answer Sydney just to make it clear. The species-specific nest work better than normal ant nest? And I guess this is an overall question both for boring or normal species, but also for species-specific nest. Would you put Alaceus niger in a species-specific nest for Habegnethus venators, or would you just recommend only this species?
I would say there are definitely certain species which it's important for, and I think there are certain species which actually it's not that important for. Nigers are they're pretty accepting of a lot of different materials, a lot of different nests. And people keep them quite successfully in acrylic nests, in test tubes, in tubs and tubes. I think I've seen them in Ytongs, plaster nests. So there are certain ants out there that just it's not that important with, and but there are definitely those more sensitive ones where absolutely it's better to have a species specific nest. Not just better, sometimes an actual requirement. So yes and no to that answer to that question.
Wonderful. And I think with that being said, we shall go into this week's ant news part. Now, I know, as Casey have sent a little message, that you do have some ant news, Casey. Can you just share your ant news?
So it is from Sherpa Design on YouTube. He's not ant related generally. He does terrariums and things like that. But he showed a nice and easy tutorial on how to order just sheets of glass from IKEA and silicone them together to make it into an aquarium, a borderless aquarium. And I thought that was super cool. It'd be super nice to build an Outworld or like an Antscape style terrarium. Just thought it was super interesting. It might be useful to somebody.
Yeah, I'm just speeding through it. It looks a brilliant end result, and it's just called "Making the Best and Easiest DIY Equipment from IKEA." Looking at it, it looks really interesting. But yeah, Wakooshi, what have I actually learned over the years talking with you? You pretty much follow everything. You have your nose in all the stuff around the community. Do you have any?
Yeah, I wouldn't say nose. I mean, I like to keep up to date with the goings on that everyone's channels and things, and because it's that's sometimes where I get inspired for what people need and what's working, what's not working, and if people are having problems. Sometimes I see the issues in videos, but I'm not told about them. So it's important to kind of keep up to date in Discord and Facebook, and the only thing I don't think I'm really on is TikTok, but everything else I'm pretty much up to date on.
Yeah, and then you can also fix people's correction if they say extra large Saturn when it's just a large Saturn stuff.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Honest
errors.
Honest mistake. But yeah, have you then seen anything specific this past week that you would like to mention? Any shout outs you would like to give to any stores or YouTubers or anything?
I'm trying to think video wise what I've seen this week. Bruma Ants has done a good video today actually, where he's done really sort of quite a new up and coming channel. I think very high quality videos.
Big shout out to Bruma Ants. I also watch all the videos. They are brilliant.
And that's a nice video showing actually where to buy ants from in one video, and then I think where to buy ant products from as well. So that was quite cool. So depending where you are in the world, there's some good content there. Top of my head, I'm trying to think what else has really been out much this week. There's been quite a bit of a slowdown on YouTube. I'm guessing hibernation related and things. So there's not as many videos being launched as there was.
It's a little bit quiet on the socials at the moment, but that's hibernation preparation, I guess. But yeah, my ant news is I've struggled a lot with motivation these past few weeks with making the ant pod and making YouTube. That's also why I took a break from. Well, it turned out to be both, only meant to be YouTube. I made a video last week about moving a few colonies. But this week, of course, as we record this video hasn't come out. But as you guys hear this, the video came out last Sunday. I tried going with a totally different style, and it's not often I would like to make ant news my own video. But my ant news is my own video I published last Sunday, because that was one video that's definitely different from any other ant video I've personally made. And that's my simple ant news. Sammy, are you here? or are you out eating?
I've returned.
Oh, welcome back. Yeah, Sam just left the chat and just went out to eat.
Okay, but no, didn't go out to eat, but I forgot I had food in, so I was actually taking it out.
Just went out to a restaurant, just casual, just start the stream. See you later.
Yeah, it's typical Sam stuff. He just
I turned up this time. What are you complaining about?
You didn't ghost anyone, and you didn't start by eating an apple. So yeah, improvements. Also,
you just can't get the staff these days.
Also, shout out to Callum and Casper who have been listening a little bit in on the podcast. Casper joining right as we ended. But yeah, I want to say, do you guys have any final things to ask Sid or talk about in this making and product podcast? Yeah, that's the thing. Casey, have you been? Casey, you made a funny comment in the comment section. Can you just say that out loud? Because
I could absolutely listen to Wakooshi knowledge dump all day. Love it. Awesome, informational. So much just quick tidbits to learn, and it's awesome. Love it.
Yeah, you can really hear how the experience. Because the thing is also, when we did leafcutter testing, I came with so many brilliant ideas, like just the best ideas, and Sid was just like, "Yeah, but how's that gonna work?" And I'm like, "That's your problem." So yeah, I feel,
yeah. I mean, that's probably the hardest part of things. Sometimes it's like I wish sometimes I wasn't making products to produce sort of in quantity, because that sucks in a lot of ways, because you can get really cool ideas and that I'd love to pursue. I'd love to make just some huge big like wall hanging nest, like massive, like 3 meters by 3 meters, and have a huge colony in there. But then the amount of time it would take to design that, it's such a waste of time for the hobby, if that makes sense. It would never be realistic to produce and sell because of shipping restrictions and production time and the amount of time it takes to design. So yeah, that does suck, because you can get excited about ideas, but it's when then you get shut down annoyingly when you're like, that's just going to take too long to produce, or it's just too complicated, or there's various reasons where it's just not financially viable to make it. So yeah, it's one of the downsides, unfortunately.
Do you think that affects a lot of ant stores afterwards, realizing that it's hard to produce? Or
yeah, I mean, well, I've no doubt that there are stores out there that have produced products. Well, I mean, I'm one of them. The leafcutter pods are a prime example of that. They are a tremendously challenging product to produce en masse, because of the nature of the fact that there's silicone involved, there's a lot of individual casting involved, there's the shipping difficulties because they're assembled in-house fully. It looks like a simple product, but there's a lot of steps and costs involved. The round acrylic tubes are much more expensive than just flat panels would be. It's probably actually like 3 times more expensive for the piece of acrylic that when it's round than if it's square walls, and there's actually less viable space in there. The Bluetooth sensors inside as well. These are things that are always becoming very challenging. And when you launch a product, it's done. It's very difficult to. It can be very difficult to change things. Yeah, it's very difficult to change things later if they're huge changes. Let's say like the difference from the first pods that we tested to the final retail release versions. And once they're released, they become you can make minor tweaks and things, but it's very difficult to change the core design without basically discontinuing and relaunching. But yeah, there are definitely products where you kind of me personally, and I'm sure other stores have realized, actually these are just taking too long to produce. I can't keep them in stock, or I have to sell them at a price that doesn't, really prices them out of the market.
Have you ever silently killed a product, like just took it off the shelf, or have you sorted it out before it came? all the way?
A lot of the time I can kind of tell because usually through prototyping, I've probably made 20 or 30 different times. I've made a product 30 times. Like with the Saturns, I have probably about 20 or 30 of them that all have different small changes to them. But I've, near enough built 30 of them. I've produced them. They're much like Outworld, so they're not necessarily a good example. But most of the products are pretty straightforward. Gen 3 obviously takes a lot more work than Gen 2 because there's not just screws on the top, which there are probably twice as many screws versus Gen 2, but there's the same amount of screws under the bottom as well. So some of these nests, whereas a Gen 2 module might have just like 4 screws, or the bigger ones might have like 8 or something. A Gen 3 equivalent where instead of 4 it might have 12 or 16, and then the larger ones can have as much as 40 screws. So there's certain aspects, yes, time and assembly definitely plays a part, and I haven't at this stage discontinued any products. Everything has been supported really fully from that was launched on the website anyway. The Gen 1 obviously was discontinued, but from Gen 2 onwards nothing has been discontinued. It's usually just been, if there's a need to discontinue it, usually what I'll do is I'll design a solution to make it work, and then that is what's replaced it.
All right. Final question. It may be an easy one, maybe a hard one. What is the most asked question you get from customers?
That's a good question, actually. That I get asked a lot. I'm trying to think what I get asked the most.
The one question.
Do you know what? The one question is, what setup would you recommend for these ants?
I thought it was going to be that.
Yeah, it's that. But it's the most difficult because the most frustrating thing is I always get asked the question, and then it's usually there's no more information following it. I always have to then delve, saying like, okay, what species, and then how big is the colony? Because obviously they're two very, very key important facts you need to know, because that will completely change the answer. But yeah, the most commonly asked question is, what setup is best for these ants? And that's it. Probably 60% of the time, that's the main question.
Lovely. And with that being said, this has been a little bit of a redoing of episode 3, because in episode 3 we also talked about a little bit of the same topics, but I feel like this is a different version, and I think it's been a wonderful chat to have with all of you. By the way, next episode is scheduled at the moment. It's a little bit hard. We have some different bombing scheduling with another American filler, because we are talking about honeypot ants. So yeah, that's going to be next episode. So a little bit of the topics today. So it's going to be exciting to hear about honeypots. I personally don't know a lot of them at all. With that being said, I just want to say thank you to all of you for listening. Be sure to share this with all of your ant-keeping friends, and you will hear from us in the next episode.